stand up for the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of our
Mighty God, I ask you to bless this council, direct and prosper its delivery.
much. Please be seated and welcome to. Thank you for coming at short notice. We have got some issues. The night under late. Yeah. The first item of business is item 1, which is the Victor Harbour Tram Authority March budget review. First recommendations that council receive and note the. Somebody like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And do I have a seconder for that? Wales? Do either of you want to speak to the report? Does anybody want to speak to the report? Those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. And the second one that council receive and note the Victor Harbour correspondence and the detailed and attached a contribution. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Seconding that. Do either of you want? Does anybody want to? Yep.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Page 10, which is uniform presentation of finances, just a query. The financial statement doesn't provide the financial ratios of where the liquidity ratio sits between 0 to 0, 10 to 50, or and I'll make comment now because they're quite need to address that because I think we, as a governing body of the Liberties, I think we have their ratios range that know how they're.
Yes, thank you. Through the Mayor, we can definitely pass it on to subsidiaries and ask them to include their targets in those statements. So pass that on.
Yeah, just that when I look at the current budget and proposed budget, variations, each column is exactly the same, strange to me. That casting a surplus borrowings are, yeah, so me, anything.
Thank you. Kemp, are there any, is there any other in relation to Westbrook?
I was just a little bit confused as well about that 6,300. Is that capital expenditure or is that depreciation? That is the amount of.
So through the Mayor, the 6,300 is depreciation. During the financial year, some assets were transferred to the authority, and so that's why that wasn't in the original budget in terms of the depreciation. So they've now made that adjustment to depreciation of assets they received. I think it was in September last year, and so that's why that is the proposed budget. There is some commentary within the pages 8 and 9 around the different the changes that have happened within the area or where they're forecasting. So it was particularly because of those free of charge gifted assets that we council
So, sorry, just to clarify, so the net lending or borrowing, that it's obviously not borrowing because it's not in brackets.
Through the mayor, that's correct. So it's net lending as it would be, which basically means that there's $6,300 in their profit and loss statement that they don't actually need cash for.
Thank you, councillor Glasbrook. Does anybody have any further questions or any they'd like to say? No. Councillor Schofield, did you want to close it? In that case, we'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 4.2, the project options for Phase 3 local roads and community infrastructure program funding. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Henderson. And seconded by councillor Hales. Does anybody want to speak to that? Those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Recommendation 2, I'll take that as read. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Henderson, and seconded by councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to recommendation 2? Councillor Henderson?
Just to say, I think this is a good motion. It seems that the people of Giles Street have been waiting a long time for something to be done there.
Thank you. Hales? No. Does anybody want to say anything? Not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Thank you. 4.3 is the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority 2022-23 budget. First recommendation, receiving and noting. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield, and seconded by councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. I will do recommendation 2 and 3 together. We're up to 4.3, councillor Mann. Recommendation 2 and 3 together. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, councillor Henderson. And seconded by, thank you, councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Hales, no. That. Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, just more of a notification, Mayor Jenkins. The authority again is going through some troubles. With board members, we've lost a board member, we've lost our executive officer. So we, I guess, you know, I think the board and the temp we have in place at the moment is trying to get together everything in place for the required timelines to get the annual plan and the finalisation of the budget put together. It's unfortunate people left for other jobs. We are recruiting again, so hopefully we can get that done sooner than later. At the moment, at this stage, I've got this together to give an indication of what's happening next financial year. So hopefully, if anyone's got any questions, I'll try and answer them for you. But if not, yeah, that's the position that the authority finds itself in again. So we'll just keep working through it.
Thank you, councillor Kemp. And yes, it has been difficult for the authority, and it was nice to have that period of stability. We had a great executive officer who's now moved on to different adventures and different pastures. So I wish you, the board and the authority, the best in your. Does anybody else want to speak to recommendation 2 and 3? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. 4.4, the Regional Community Sport and Rec Precinct Phase 1 Community Consultation Feedback. This is something that we've all been very involved with and looking forward to receiving this. I'm happy to do the recommendations all on block, or if you'd like me to do them one by one, I can do that. Councillor Kemp?
I'd like to discuss each one individually, please.
Yep, sure. So the first one is receiving and noting the report. Councillor Hales, thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Either of you want to speak to the receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation is that council endorse lot 202 as the preferred location. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson and Councillor Schofield seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I can't support this recommendation as it stands at the moment, due to a number of reasons. We went out to public consultation to give the community 3 options, and they've come back with what they believe is the best one. That's fine. That's fantastic. I remember the CEO saying in the beginning of our term, when we start to purchase vacant land, we have discussions around the use of those vacant land, and we can engage the community in those discussions as to what they would see in those vacant land. I'm not against the sporting precinct. I want it built just as much as anybody else, but I just think we've missed a step. Also, there's been discussions and conversations around some partnerships with some schools that may be interested in it. We haven't investigated them, and to have a discussion with them to find out is anything viable there or not. So there's no resolution for that to take place, but there was discussion around some workshops that there could be a viability. I think we even received a letter of intent from a couple of schools saying that might be interested to have a discussion about it. So I think at the moment, really there's a lot of information which is missing from what I believe was put up in the beginning to get us moving in this area. I know this has been a long time coming to get this community centre up and running. Sorry, the sports recreation precinct. But I think that we need to look at, if it comes back, the community as a whole, looking at, depending on the viability of other partnerships and arrangements, that we should possibly defer this. So I'll adjourn this an adjournment motion to get more information, provide a better location, and whether there's some potential for some partnerships in order to happen. The concept designs and all can still go ahead, but the actual land, I think we owe our community an opportunity to say what they want that land for. They may prefer to have something else there, like 202, and not a sporting precinct. Never given them the opportunity.
So you've moved an adjournment motion.
Yes.
Do I have a seconder for that? That motion has lapsed for want of a seconder. Go back to the original motion. Does anybody want to say, does anybody on the original motion? Councillor Glasbrook.
Just a question in relation to endorsing lot 202. Should we be more specific than that? I mean, it's a large parcel of land. It could be right around on the ring road, for example, where we know that it's supposed to be behind the TAFE area there. Is it necessary to be more specific or not really?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I don't think so. We know what the parcel is, but certainly through the concept, we can be very clear about the actual allotment number more specifically, but lot 202 is what it is titled.
Yeah, okay, but because that land goes right the way around the encounter centre. It's a big parcel of land. Yeah. So I just
That's correct.
Need to,
so we're looking at the whole area.
So that whole parcel of land, not just the land by the police station and the TAFE area.
Through the Mayor, lot 202, that's right. So it's the whole area. Part of it, remember, along the river there is floodplain, so we can't build anything there.
Yeah.
So it is, that's right, it is the whole parcel.
And I'm correct that does go all the way around the counter centre?
That's correct.
So why are we using that point? That we're not going to use that parcel of land, for example, by the encounter centre for this sporting complex as well. Is that what you're saying?
Through the mayor.
Every piece of land that's there, we're going to use for a sporting complex.
So part of that parcel has been set aside for emergency services by the state government, and the rest of it, so we will have hopefully an entrance exit that curves around behind the other, like behind TAFE, so that we have egress and exit of 2 roads. But it is that whole parcel, and then it's bordered by the river.
Okay, I just hadn't imagined that it was going to use that much land, that's all. I don't know if that was made clear to us in any of our pictures. Have we had a picture with that? Yeah?
Through the mayor,
I've
so
got
it has
the whole-
been in
the
all
whole
the
title
maps
has
and in
been.
the workshop, yep. So, yep, I've actually got the workshop here if you want me to, just to give it to you, just so you can look at it and visualise it.
Thank you.
While Kathy's doing that, does anybody else want to speak to recommendation 2? Councillor Littley?
Yeah, I'm in support of this. I think that this parcel of land,
Actually, sorry, Brian, I can't hear you while they're discussing it. Wait, we'll wait for them to finish. Go ahead, Brian.
yeah, I'm in support of this. I feel that that parcel of land is absolutely ideal for the project at this point in time as we're going into a concept phase. And I do think that the land size and the whole of land size will no doubt be readily swallowed up when you take into account associated parking and the fact that we're looking to have adequate accommodation for a number of sports and community function as well, tying into and also the precinct that it's in as well, between the I guess between the existing sporting facility in Encounter Bay precinct, the high school, and different services, including the TAFE college there, and with the private school not too far away. Yeah, I think that it's a parcel of land that, as a community, for many years, they've been screaming out for council to have this parcel of land, and all I've really heard from the community is for this kind of use, this type of use, or a similar use. So I think that's been very strong over decades, as far as I can see. So I'm very much in support of this as the preferred option. It's only the preferred option, so we can do concept designs knowing the land space and the layout that we've got.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Are there any more comments in relation to recommendation 2? Councillor.
Sorry, through the mayor, Councillor Glasbrook, just to clarify, that parcel of land is for the precinct, not the actual building itself. So the facility is only a part of that.
Thank you. For some reason, I just didn't realise we were going to use up all of that land, that's all.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a question to administration. Through some of the feedback we received, there were certain groups in favour of a second oval or a pitch or that sort of size. In terms of looking at how the different groups can be met and potentially within this next sort of concept plan, is there scope, if we were to also look at the Gillespie land as a potential site for an oval or something in the medium to long-term future, if it wasn't able to fit in this, or if it doesn't fit, could there be something in the report that says that might be a staging option or something in the future, or whether there's scope in this existing?
Thank you. Through the mayor. You're absolutely right. It is a jigsaw puzzle. We are not going to fit all of the sport and recreation needs of our community in that one location. It will need to be a decentralised model. So we know that not everything will fit on that parcel of land, and nor will we have the budget to proceed with all of that at once. So it will need to be staged. So we know, for example, that we still haven't resolved a home for athletics. We know through the consultation that the footy clubs are saying they need an additional one, at least they're saying they need an additional oval. What we're trying to address with this is particularly the indoor stadium, and then look at what other needs they are. We also know we have some other sporting clubs on our coast that may need some support. So yes, we're looking at a bigger picture master plan that looks at that staged or decentralised model, so we take into account the broader needs.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or any further debate? Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think this is the logical site for this sports precinct, and obviously the majority of our community thinks so too. It has a central location with safe and reasonably easy access, and I think it allows us to provide some sporting needs almost immediately, but with the option of growing as the future changes with those needs of our sporting groups.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. That closes debate. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Call a
The third
division.
recommendation is, I've started the third recommendation. Councillor Kemp, I've started reading that third recommendation out. That council
Sorry,
approves.
point of order.
Point of order, I agree.
I called a division before you started reading it.
I think I started reading it as you called a point of a division. I'm happy to continue with the third recommendation without going for a division. The third recommendation is that council approve the development of a draft concept design for the Regional Community Sport and Recreation Precinct. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield? And seconded by Councillor Henderson. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Schofield? Councillor Henderson? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. This concept design, question I have is, what are we going to be designing if we're talking about the whole lot of different types of facilities that need to be developed? So could you just clarify exactly the concept design, and we're putting a budget limit on what we would be wanting? Because when we first went through this process, it was up around, well, half of 100 million. We set on a set figure for a medium size. Are we sticking to that? Because considering the fact that we got to include all these other different requests that come in now, I'm just wondering, we got to set some parameters around the concept design.
Thank you.
Kathy?
Through the Mayor. Correct, Councillor Kemp. So we did set, and the Chamber set a budget of around $18 million as a medium scale facility, and that is for the, if you like, the sports stadium itself, the indoor sports stadium. So we are working to that. The concept design will take into account what is required in that stadium. So we know there is a really definite and definitive need around basketball and gymnastics, for example, and some of the other indoor sports. We also know that community has put forward some suggestions about other things they'd like to see there that might bring some more vibrancy or some more activation of that space. So this concept is around what will what the community needs, and some additional suggestions, and then maybe around what will fit in that indoor facility on that community sport and rec precinct. So we have very definitely set a budget, or you have very definitely set a budget, and that's what we're working to. We're conscious that some of those other sporting or recreation needs or wants will fall outside of the scope of this, and we will need to do further work there to accommodate everything the community wants or needs, and there obviously will need to be some sort of prioritising there.
A second question, thank you. It's the 18 million for the stadium design. If we go down the path of decentralising and putting other facilities elsewhere, we could be up to the original budget we first looked at, which we didn't want. Could that be a possibility?
Through the Chamber, it could be if you approve it, But for this current project, we are just looking at that site and meeting that need, which was our original scope. What does the, how might we provide for an indoor stadium? How might we also, for example, athletics, which was part of the feasibility, original feasibility. So you might recall they're currently located on the Victor Harbor R-7 school. So we're looking at all of the other ovals in the area and how we might find a solution for them that isn't necessarily building an entire new, was what was in that original $50 million feasibility. So we're looking at how we might resolve some of those community concerns or needs without necessarily starting from scratch. It is a big jigsaw puzzle, and we're just trying to find out how to effectively and efficiently. And that was part of the consultation, actually defining a little more broadly what the community needs were. But we've been very clear the entire way that we're looking at a medium scale facility, and that the council has already set a budget for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or any further commentary? Councillor Glazebrook?
Yes, thank you. Just to refresh my memory, I'm sorry I've forgotten, that original proposal that we come up with.
Through the Mayor, I'm not sure what budget you actually set, but the cost estimate of that plan that was drawn in the feasibility was around 46 million,
Yeah, 45, yeah.
excluding two additional items that were specifically excluded. One was the upgrading of the rec centre, and the other was the upgrading of the R-7 oval for athletics.
Yeah, thank you. So you're suggesting here that the council administration, when you say that council approved the development of a draft concept design, is that going to be done by council administration, or are you going to get a consultant to do that, or?
Through the Mayor. So we have, there's a consultant, a contract consultant called Inside Edge, and they are specialists in sports leisure planning. They wrote the state guidelines, so they will physically do the concept for us to bring back. One of the reasons that we've been doing the consultation is house is because we wanted to retain ownership of it. Obviously, there's some budget consideration there as well, but we're very conscious that the community has heard from numerous consultants on this. So we wanted to be able to directly steer the way the concept was designed. So we'll be working with Inside Edge, and they have all of the consultation feedback. But they're the subject matter experts in physically drawing up a concept for us to consider.
So there'll be no input along the stage. They're just going to, as option 4 says, that they're just going to come back and present us with a finished proposal. There's going to be any more option for input or along the way of that design stage?
Through the Mayor. So we'll come back to a workshop for you to consider that concept. So you'll need to be comfortable with the concept before we proceed to community consultation. So yes, if we need to go do iterations, we will. But the first stage is to get that concept to be able to look at something and make sure that it does correspond with what the community has suggested they would like to see.
Okay, I'm a little bit concerned about that. I mean, we've had that before. We've been presented with a very large concept that fell over and cost obviously a significant amount of money. So I'm just surprised that there's not more of a process with a little bit more involvement to get that concept design to completion. If do you understand what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
So this, sorry, through the Mayor. So I think last time one of the differences was there was no budget set originally. Like it was the, if you like, the wish list. And some of the sporting clubs will tell you that it was the wish list. It was a bells and whistles development. This time we have you have set the budget up front. So that is what we're working to, and that is what the design, that's what the brief is, to work to that budget. Unlike last time, it was just what would you like to see community, full stop. This time we're working to a budget.
Okay. And one last thing. So you've mentioned that that's for a stadium, the $18 million. Have you not included car parking or site works, or have you?
Through the Mayor. So that is for the project.
Okay, so for the entire project, not just a stadium.
No, that is for the project. We need to $18 million, assuming we can achieve 50%, at least 50% of grant funding. That is for the project. It may be that if there are additional, like decentralized other sporting recreation things that we might want to do later, paths or also, it could be all sorts of things we've heard from the community they would like to see. They may be staged, they may come back to the chamber, but for this project, our budget is 18 million.
Total budget of 18, not 18 contribution council.
No, 18 million with subject to, so it's subject to,
So 9 million from council and 9 million from the government.
or
Okay.
governments, or third party, private, public, if we can secure that as well.
For the entire project.
The entire project. Notwithstanding, there is an additional amount for detailed design. That is just for construction.
Thank you, councillor Glasbrook. Does anybody have any other questions or anything else that they'd like to say? Councillor Schofield, do you want to close the debate? No, I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 4 is that the draft concept design be presented to council for consideration prior to a second phase of community consultation. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Hales, thank you. And seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? No, does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. This recommendation is like how long is a piece of string? Surely we can put a set date as we want to achieve something in 6 months' time or 9 months' time. So there's some goal that we're aiming for and before we go to second consultation, because I can see a question coming straight away from the community when we're having a consultation. Sorry, I don't know because we haven't set a date as to a target. So is it possible to have some type of project plan timeline?
Through the mayor. So the timeline would be as we presented last week in the where we are and what the next steps are. So we, with this project and with the Bluff Master Plan, our aim is to present the final plans to the chamber by the 5th of September before you go into caretaker. So we've scheduled the progress of the project toward that. So our aim is the June will be the concept development, and we will come back to you. I think we're scheduled to come back to you at the end of June, and we've got June, July, because we've got the concept for public consultation coming to you for final. I'm sorry, I'm just reading from the workshop notes the other day for final support, hopefully from you in July. So over the next 2 months, we'll be working on that concept and coming back to you with that concept.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or any further commentary before I put this to the vote? Councillor Hales, did you want to say anything in closing? All those in favour and those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move to item 5.1, which is a confidential matter. I won't read out the whole recommendation, but needless to say that we are going into confidence for those who are interested because it's a legal matter in relation to infrastructure options, and we'll be talking about legal advice and its information in relation to current litigation that involves the council. Would someone like to move recommendation 1? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's unanimously carried. Thank you.